So hello, and welcome to another episode of Teaching with Inquiry Live. Thank you very much for joining me. I do have a bit of a cold tonight, so my voice sounds a little bit different. That is why. But I definitely wanted to talk to you tonight about how I choose books for my classroom and why I think the ability to choose books is a really important task I think that teachers have, because it's important to reflect the diversity and the images of our students. They need to see themselves reflected in what it is that we are reading in our classroom. And the burden and responsibility as teachers comes on us to make sure that our students in our rooms see themselves reflected in positive lights in the literature that they are reading, so that they're not just given one perspective and one perspective only, but that there's a variety of perspectives. And not only is it just that they themselves should be reflected, but if you have, say, a homogeneous group of students, that you are also reflecting a different worldview to your students that goes beyond perhaps the boundaries of their own individual homogeneous community. So that is what I'm going to talk to you tonight, is how I choose books for my classroom, why I think careful selection of the books that you read is important in your room, and how you can get your hands on some interesting places to find great books that are out there. So thank you so much for joining me. My name is Patty, and I am the teacher blogger behind madlylearning.com, and I come live every single Monday night at 9 p.m. to talk about teaching and learning in our classroom, specifically with using more inquiry-based learning in your classroom in all subject areas, not just in science and social studies, but also in language, in math, and in everything we do, bringing in those inquiry-based pedagogical strategies into all aspects of teaching, because good teaching is good teaching, and we can make learning fun and engaging for both ourselves and our students. So like I said, tonight I'm going to talk about how to choose books for your classroom, and what are I have 5 kind of criteria questions that I ask myself when choosing a book to read in my classroom. And I also look at the 2 different kinds of books that I could be selecting. Now, myself, you have 2 different kinds of books. I look at novels and picture books. I rely far more heavily instructionally on picture books. And the reason I do that is because it allows me to bring quite a different perspective every single week into my classroom. I can bring different topics, different issues, different authors, different perspectives, and different teaching and learning strategies and concepts into my classroom, because I can use and get through a picture book within a week or 2. Whereas a novel would take me quite a bit longer. I still definitely do read novels in my classroom. However, I often will read those for fun, and we will connect those to the picture books and to ourselves and have a lot of great discussion. The read alouds that I'm using, I'm often, any of the work that we're doing with a novel, I am often connecting that to oral language. Whereas a picture book, I will tie that into more instructional strategies, as well as weave that through my shared reading, my guided reading, as well as my independent activities that my students are working on. So, how do I choose a picture book or a book, any book, in my classroom? Well, I ask myself about 5 questions that really help to guide my choice of what books I'm choosing. So the first is really investigating whose point of view is presented. And that's not to say that I'm only looking for 1 or 2 points of view. I'm actually looking for quite a wide variety of point of views if I'm picking a different picture book each week. So I want to look and make sure that if I look at the picture book sitting in front of me on my table, that I have a variety of voices and perspectives presented. So I won't always look for the same voice speaking all the time, that I want a variety of voices in different life experiences and from different parts of the world. So I try to think of the continents and making sure that I have different religions, different skin colors, different ethnic backgrounds, different experiences within the same community, socioeconomic status, different problems that may be encountered with neurotypical and non-neurotypical learners, with special education, and so on and so forth. So I definitely want to make sure that there is a variety of learning in my classroom. So that's the first question, is whose point of view is presented? The next piece of information that I want to ask, what is the theme being presented in the story? What is the purpose or theme? What is the lesson that's being covered? I definitely don't want there to be too much of a repetitive theme. I don't want every single book to be read about bullying. I don't want every single story to be read about friendship. And I definitely don't want every single story to be reading about courage or perseverance. I try to use a variety of different themes. In fact, I like to structure my choice of picture books around themes. And I try to choose a different theme topic each month, whether it's courage or perseverance, trustworthiness, friendship, or bravery. All of those things can be covered each month, and I choose picture books that relate to those themes. So that's number 2. The third question is, does this represent a worldview of my students, or does it represent a part of the world that is missing for my students? So this is an important one, is I want students to see that the world for children and for people like them exists and is like different experiences for different people all around the world. Now, I want to show both the positive and negative light about different historical and current events. I definitely don't only want to look at different perspectives from one historical point of view, or only share stories where we're talking about history of a certain group of people. I want to make sure that I have all positive and even negative at times light represented in the picture books that I'm choosing. And number 4 is, does the story push their thinking? So I don't want a story that on the surface is really simple or primary or easy to grasp. I definitely want to make sure that there is a depth and complexity to the story, even if it may appear as though the story on the surface is very simple and easily accessible by younger students. I want there to be that underlying theme or message in the story that really tackles one of those issues that we talked about with perseverance or grief or freedom or trustworthiness. I really want to make sure that that is a thematic presence in the story, and that there encourages that the picture books, whether it's through the illustrations or through the words itself, really encourages a lot of deep thought, or allows students to access much deeper thought. That is probably one of the most important parts when picking a picture book, especially for junior learners, is I'm not just simply teaching them the structure of a simple story, but I'm really focusing on getting them to think about the elements of the story, the theme of the story, the main idea of the story, and getting them to think a little bit more beyond the literal interpretation of the text. So I want my books to make sure that that is present there. I also want, as I said, push their thinking and depth. I kind of did 4 and 5 together. That's okay. So I want there to push their thinking, and I want those stories to have depth. So if I'm thinking that those are my 5 questions that I'm asking myself to make sure that the criteria is met. So whose point of view is presented? What theme is presented? Does it represent the worldview of my students, or a missing worldview that my students might need to be aware of? Does it push their thinking? And does the story have depth? And social justice is an important one in there too, with pushing their thinking, depth, and worldview. So once I have those questions asked, and I need to figure out some books, where am I going to look for books? So let's think about novels, because I use the same criteria whether or not I'm talking about novels or I'm talking about picture books. So if I'm talking about novels, there's some great places to go to get great novel suggestions, often current books that are very topical on topics that are wonderful for students to be learning about social justice issues, or characters that have a lot of complexity and depth. It's the very first place that I learned about books such as Fish in a Tree, as well as Wonder. And if you've got one place that's going to recommend books like that, including other ones like Refugee and I, Robot, which I haven't read, but I know they're on my book list this summer to be reading so that I can then also read them with my students, this one place is probably going to be your first go-to place. And that is the Global Read Aloud by Pernille Ripp. Now, she has put together a bit of a lovely place of books. And she every year runs a contest that begins in the fall and challenges classrooms to pick one of her read aloud books, and globally with classrooms all across North America and the world to read those books together and then to talk about them together. And she will pull in the authors to also talk about them and participate in this. And really, it is quite the event if you can get on board and follow along with her for these global read aloud books that she chooses. She chooses a variety of books at all different age levels, and you pick the one you want, and then you participate with other people and have your students work with these other classrooms and talk about the books. If you have missed that and you just need a book now, because I don't think Global Read Aloud is happening now. I haven't actually checked if she does it other times in the year. But if you need a great book, that is a great place to look at this year's books as well as previous year's books to find some gems that you may not be aware of have recently been released. Out of My Mind was one that made that list. I, Robot, Refugee, Wonder, and Fish in a Tree are all wonderful books that have made that list for junior grades. So again, that is the Global Read Aloud, and I think it's the globalreadaloud.com. But if you Google it, you'll find it, and I'll have a link to that on the blog post that's associated with tonight's live video. Another place for inspiration is my own personal experiences as a student. Going back and relying on some of those all-time favorite books that were favorites of mine as a student going to school because they were favorites of my teachers. Things like Mrs. Sutton's grade 3 Roald Dahl fascination, and we think we read about 4 or 5 different Roald Dahl books. I did have her for 2 years, more than just grade 3. But she read some amazing books, and she was a lover of books and loved reading, and really got me hooked on to a few author series as a young child because of her love of books. And I find myself as a teacher, when I'm reading books to younger students, I will often use some of the same books that my own grade 3 teacher used with the students that I am currently teaching. So there's nothing wrong with going back to some of the classics that we perhaps had read to us as students, or your parents read to you, and reading those well-loved books to your students as well. And the third place I look for novels and book lists is Goodreads. Goodreads is a crowd-sourced book review website that will often compile different book lists of popular books for certain age groups based on a set of criteria that you might use as a search term. So say books on perseverance, and it might give you a list of books that have the theme of perseverance inside them. One of the good things I really like about Goodreads is that you get user-generated reviews on the book, including some fairly detailed book summaries. So if it's not quite a book that you will have time to reread ahead of time, you can read their summaries and get a good idea if you think the book might be a good fit for you and your students. Another place that I think is a great place is for picture books. Now, Instagram. And it seems a little strange, and I never would have thought that Instagram would be a great place for inspiration for books. But there's quite a few teachers on Instagram that have channels that are dedicated to book recommendations. Specifically, book recommendations that meet those 5 criteria for me, including people like Ramona Reads and Diverse Reads, which is a Instagram account specifically made by the Tutu teacher, who is also different handle, same person on Instagram, but she has a handle called Diverse Reads, where she's specifically looking at books that often are featuring a person of color as the main character and not always in a historical context. So where it's modern day stories with people of color. And I think that's a really important thing too, because often those books are not highlighted as much. So I think she gives a good voice to those books, and she's got some amazing suggestions on that Instagram account. So that's Diverse Reads. And the other one, which I've recently come across, it seems as though when I was looking through her Instagram feed, that this is something she's begun to do more frequently, is have recommended picture book reads, is The Colorful Apple, spelt color with without the U. So The American Way, The Colorful Apple. So that's Ramona Recommends, Diverse Reads, and The Colorful Apple are all great Instagram places to check out good recommendations for picture books that are going to meet that criteria of challenging and pushing thinking and reflecting the student's life and environment. Another place I like to look for picture books specifically I will look at the book lists for the picture book awards, such as the Caldecott Awards or the Coretta Scott King Awards will often give me a great book list to get started on, to find some new and interesting books that have amazing illustrations and often corresponding text that is also deep and gets them thinking. So those are another two great places I like to look for new picture books that I have not come across yet before, are the Caldecott and Coretta Scott King Awards. And third is it's kind of a secret location. Maybe it's not so secret if you know the book, but this is Strategies That Work. Now, this is a book that was published, I don't even know when it was published, but I've had it for a while, and I've been teaching 12 years. So it's been published within that time. And this was given to me early in my career, and I don't know if this is the first or second version of it. I know there's two versions. I don't know which one I have. Maybe the first one. Anyways, one of the great things about this book is specifically near the back of the book, there are book lists. It says great book and author sets. I don't know if you can see that. Great book and author sets to launch strategy and instruction and practice. And then it goes through and lists a whole bunch of picture books that are specifically organized into either author sets as well as comprehension sets. So you can have books that are all about questioning or making connections. You can look at different Eve Bunting books or Patricia Polocco books, visualizing books. If you've got an area that you think students need to focus on, whether it's inferencing or making connections, if it's an area and you're looking specifically for picture books that lend themselves really well to practicing that comprehension strategy in isolation because it's something you've seen your students need help with, then that is a great resource to go to because it's already kind of sorted the picture books into ones that lend themselves really well to those strategies. As well as earlier in the beginning of the book, it'll actually give you ideas and lessons on how to teach those specific strategies with some organizers. So that's my oldie but a goodie, but I still will find if I'm specifically looking for a book on a certain strategy for one reason or another, I will often get started here, and then I'll use a combination of this as well as a Google search for the Amazon. So if you go to Amazon and you type in the book maybe that's in here, and perhaps it's out of date, if you scroll down to the bottom, there's also the suggested books. Other people liked this book, and there might be a list of books on the bottom. That's another way that I find really good books, because I'll find a book I do like, and then Amazon will recommend books that other people have purchased that are similar to the book you're looking for. And I've actually found quite a few books looking that way. So using Amazon's people also liked these books as you scroll down to the bottom. So, and the final way that you can find great books for your classroom that meet your criteria is to ask other teachers. So the people that you work with in your building probably have a favorite book. Ask them, and you will probably find that there's a lot of books that you didn't know about that they have found and absolutely love and adore. So with that in mind, I'm going to share with you some of my favorite books that I have here that I can actually show you. I have too many books. Here are some of my favorites. We Are All Wonders. So if clearly you can see what I got what I paid for it. We Are All Wonders, based on the book Wonder. I liked the fact that it's a picture book linked with a novel. So if you happen to be reading the novel in your classroom, then We Are All Wonders is a great connection because the students can see how books are connected. I Am Not a Number is a wonderful book on residential schools. And that is another great one. I think this book, read by Michael Hall, is a really important book to be reading in your classroom. I plan on reading this every year with my students. I think it's really important to understand the lessons that are in here, and Michael Hall presents the lessons about red, who is a red crayon on the outside but a blue crayon on the inside. I think it's a really easy way to present this story, and it's an important story to present to students. 0, 1, and 2 by the same author. One of my favorite series. Kids love these books. It is such a great, simple book, but it's also inferential. So there's a simple story on the surface, but there is a much deeper story on underneath. And students also have to really look at how the author uses words in multiple ways and multiple meanings. And she's an absolute brilliant writer in that regard. And we also have, this isn't one of my favorite books, but one of my favorite authors. I do like this book, but I actually like all books by Chris Van Allsburg, and his books are wonderful when you're teaching inferring and reading between the lines, because there's a lot that is said in the pictures that is not said in the text. And one of my favorite back to school books that I think we should all read is Thank You, Mr. Falker by Patricia Poloco. And it is one of my back to school September reads, and is part of my Ignited Literacy series, as well as 1, not 0, but 1 is also part of my Ignited Literacy series, as well as Red, and We Are All Wonders will be as well. So those books are all a part of that. So those are my favorites. So if you're asking me what my favorite books are, that is my favorite books. I'm just seeing the question here from, I'm assuming it's Laurel, but you've split it up. And hi, Cliff from the UK. You said French Immersion. French Immersion books. A lot of these books also come in French Immersion. I do work in a dual track French Immersion English school. I don't teach French Immersion. I teach on the English side. But knowing that our school library is full of both French and English books, not all, but a lot of these books are available in French. So if you are in a French immersion school, ask your librarian. Sometimes there is grant money for buying French books for your library. Sometimes there's some extra funds from the principal, as well as running scholastic book fairs during your open house has really been the biggest help to contribute to our French library, because parents are buying books during the open house, and the extra bonus money that is given to the school for running the book fair helps to buy some of those French immersion books. Scholastic's got quite an amazing selection, I think, of French immersion books in those little paper catalogs that come in the mail every month to your school. And if your students are buying some of those books, using your bonus bucks to buy some of these books from Scholastic, if they're available, is a great way to do it. But there are a lot of these books translated into French. I believe, thank you, Mr. Fokker, is Red is translated. This one, that is translated into French. I've seen it in the library. And We Are All Wonders is also translated into French, as well as this one, I Am Not a Number, is definitely translated into French, and your school should have it. Frankly, I think this is probably one that would be an easy sell to your principal to spend money on to buy if you let him know, because we're talking about residential schools. And yes, this one is definitely. And it's a great book. And a really important one. If you're teaching in Canada, I think this one, and there's a few other ones, Stolen Words, is another one. But I think it's important that at some point in time, you need to be reading stories about residential schools and about First Nations perspectives in your classroom. So I think that is a great one that has been translated. And I want to say I know it's definitely been provided to every school, I think, in our school board. So I think that is important. Yes, Fatty Legs is also another great one that has been translated as well. And I think there's so many good ones. There's so many good books, which is why I wanted to talk about this tonight, because there are so many good books. So it's really important that we narrow it down and choose which ones that we do. And I definitely can't read all of these books in a year. In fact, some of these books aren't even in my Ignited Literacy series because there's not enough time to get them all done in the amount of weeks. There was just way too many books to choose from. So I guess that just means I'm going to have to keep putting out more weeks next year. Maybe. We'll see. Anyways, that's all I have for you tonight before I lose my voice completely. I do need to go to work tomorrow. So I am going to sign off and say thank you so much for joining me and letting me talk to you about picture books, because they really are one of my passions and my loves. What I love doing the most, I think, in education, reading picture books. But anyways, thank you so much for joining me. I will see you next week on Monday at 9 o'clock, where we'll talk again about teaching with inquiry live in your classroom. Thanks so much. Bye for now.